afternoon, and good evening, Comp Lab students. So, we are in the Flip the Script module, and you are working on being able to edit your own essays without specific feedback from me, or just being able to edit work that you're going to do. Because in the long run, you may not have somebody giving you feedback in return, they just may say, there are issues, and I want you to be able to pick up on those issues on your own. This submodule, we're going to specifically discuss common grammar and structure issues in writing, because I want you to be able to pick up on these things, and these are things that everybody makes issues with. Even I do sometimes, I'm going to admit to it, but these are things I want you to be able to notice and pick up on in your own writing so you can correct them in the long run. So the first is what we're calling a run-on sentence. A run-on sentence is two independent clauses, that is a sentence with a subject and a verb that can stand on its own, exist by itself, that are not joined together by correct punctuation, or they're not joined together by no punctuation. So I'm going to show you some examples. You can fix a run-on by adding in proper punctuation, which is a comma and conjunction, semicolon or period, to separate the two independent clauses. Comma conjunction, some of you may be familiar with the mnemonic device fanboys for it. If not, the most common conjunctions are for and nor, but or yet, so. Fanboys. Some of you may remember conjunction junction, what's your function for that? But those are the ones that you will most commonly use in your writing. So the example sentence here says, John was a good guy, he helped me out when I needed it most. That is a run-on sentence. Two sentences that can stand by themselves that need assistance and they need punctuation somewhere. So the first example is the comma conjunction. John was a good guy, comma, and he helped me out when I needed it most. And the second corrected example shows you a semicolon. John was a good guy. He helped me out when I needed it most. And the third is the period, which is the most common one you're going to use besides the comma conjunction. John was a good guy. He helped me out when I needed it most. Keep these three things in mind when you notice run-on sentences. Most often you will use periods. Sometimes the comma conjunctions will be more helpful in fixing the run-on sentence. It just depends on how you want to break up your writing itself. The next issue that is very common in writing are what we refer to as sentence fragments. So a sentence fragment is a sentence that does not have a subject, a verb, or both, and therefore is not an independent clause. A fragment can be fixed by adding the part of the sentence that's missing to it to make it into an actual independent clause. So an example, came by my office yesterday. This is lacking a subject. Who came by the office? You don't know that from this sentence. So you can fix it by saying, my student came by my office yesterday. My student is a subject, so the sentence is now complete. Another example sometimes is music. A lot of music has fragments in it, which is fine, but if you look at music, it is filled with fragments. So this example would be something that you could fix. It says, said I'm the shit, couldn't fuck with me if they wanted to. Who said that? And so you have to fill it in. Keep that in mind. A lot of people tend to write fragments, not intentionally, but fragments tend to go with parts of the sentences that are around them as well. So when you look at your fragment, if there's a sentence before or after it that it can go with, just add it into that sentence. Then we have comma splices. These are the big ones. A comma splice is when a comma is used incorrectly in a sentence. So to correct it, you're going to remove that comma. I do have a slideshow available for you on the portal to look at with all the comma rules and examples. I'm not going to do all the comma rules in this because it is extensive. But when you have John was, comma, a big guy, that's a comma splice. You don't need the comma there. John was a big guy is how you take it out. So keep that in mind. If you notice where commas where you don't need them, they don't fit in, remove them. And I know people oftentimes have commas where they don't need to be because we tend to punctuate like we speak. So if we pause a lot, like I just did then, you would potentially put commas there because you think they're needed, but they're not. One of the next common mistakes is what we refer to as subject-verb agreement. That means that the subject and the verb do not match in number or gender. And by number, I mean if the subject is many people, the verb needs to go along with that many. If you have a singular subject, the verb must be singular. If the subject is plural, the verb must be as well. The example of this is they is going to the fair tomorrow night. They is, while it is something that may be normal conversation for many people, is not correct. So you would say they are going to the fair tomorrow night. And the same as I seen that movie. You usually have only seen the inside of a book. You saw that movie though. So that's something that just keep in mind. The subject and the verb, you have to keep those cohesive in your writing. Then we have semicolons, and I know this is something not a lot of people are familiar with or they're uncomfortable with. If you're not too familiar or comfortable with using them, you don't have to, but I'm going to go over them here just in case. A semicolon is used to join two closely related independent clauses. What it means by closely related is they're talking about the same topic. To separate items in a series, if commas are used within the items, that is a very complex one, I promise you. Or to join two independent clauses when the second clause begins with a conjunctive adverb, however, therefore, or a transition. In fact, for example, so I'm going to show you some examples of this. I do not care where we eat. I like all kinds of food. That is two similar topics in two sentences. I can join them with a beautiful semicolon. I love a good horror movie remake. House of Wax is my favorite horror movie remake of all time, I think. Again, same topic, semicolon joins it. I'm undergoing wisdom teeth removal tomorrow. Therefore, I will have to miss work to recover. You see that therefore? You're using that semicolon before it. A few of my students are not passing class because of attendance. Therefore, I'm not going to let them have any extra credit to help their grades. Again, therefore, if you're using it in a sentence and you want to use a semicolon and they're both about the same thing, you are totally welcome to do it. A colon should only be used to introduce a list or series, to introduce an explanation, an example, or a summary, to introduce a word or phrase that renames another noun, to introduce a lengthy or heavily punctuated quotation. You're going to use a colon only at the end of an independent clause. Again, if you're not comfortable with using them, you don't have to. But you can always practice using them by start with list writing, because that's the easiest way to use a colon. This example. These are 5 of my favorite movies: The Lord of the Rings trilogy, Labyrinth, The Witch, Repo the Genetic Opera, and Inglourious Basterds. It's just a list. I'm giving you a list. There you go. Then I'm introducing a quote to you in the words of my mother: everything in its place and a place for everything. And the last example, it didn't matter who you wanted to win. The Electoral College had the final say. Again, if you're not comfortable, start using them in lists, and then you can move on from there. But you don't have to use colons in your writing or semicolons. Please keep that in mind. Next, we have quotation marks. This is something students and people, not just students, people often use incorrectly. Quotation marks are only used when directly quoting speech or things from written text. Only when you're quoting stuff directly, word for word. You will not use quotation marks to add emphasis to a word, which a lot of people do. You can add emphasis by italicizing the word. So here's an example. Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. We must be over the rainbow, Dorothy exclaimed. Well, that's a quote from the movie, so I need to put it in quotation marks. Open quote, Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. We must be over the rainbow. Close quote, Dorothy exclaimed. And then, that is a lie he told to keep himself from getting in trouble. That's where we're trying to emphasize the word lie, but we want to do it with italics instead. That is a lie he told to keep himself from getting in trouble. This is one of my favorite ones to talk about because I can use this beautiful example of Cookie Monster. When you're choosing between I or me in a sentence, whether you should use I or me in your writing, I is always the subject of a sentence and me is the object. If you cannot figure out which one to use, take away the first part to see if it sounds correct. This is the Cookie Monster thing. Cookie Monster always says, me want cookies. But it's I want cookies because I am the subject. I am doing the thing. Me is always the thing is happening to me. So let's look at these two examples. John and I or me went to the store. So remove John and from the sentence. Which one sounds correct? And this is where reading aloud can really help you in the long run because you can pick up on things when you read them out loud. John and I went to the store. Sounds great. John and me went to the store. So I went to the store is correct. Me went to the store, not correct. He started to yell at John and I or me. Well, we just said John and I in the first one, so it would be John and I, correct? He started to yell at I. No, it doesn't sound right, does it? He started to yell at me. That does, though. So he started to yell at John and me. You can always remove the first part of your sentence to help you figure out which one works versus usually I is the subject of the sentence. Subject. Me is the object. It's happening to me. I am doing the thing. That means that's the subject. The object is it happens to the thing that it's happening to. So if I'm talking about somebody's yelling at me, they're yelling at me, the object. I'm not doing the yelling unless I'm yelling at him. These are just a few miscellaneous errors, things that I'm not going to expect you to know how to fix, but they may be things that you may notice yourself. So the three miscellaneous errors are wrong word or word choice, clarity, and who versus whom. And I know that last one is one some of you are going, oh, about. I get it. But wrong word or word choice is just where the word that you're used is being used incorrectly or it doesn't fit into the context of your writing. Do not try to use a thesaurus to make your writing sound more advanced. I always appreciate and prefer students who write the way they would speak over trying to make themselves sound more intelligent than they are in their own writing, because usually if you use a thesaurus, you're going to wind up using the wrong word from the thesaurus because context and connotation and denotation come into play with words. Clarity means that your sentence is just not clear. You have to rewrite it to make the meaning of it clear to your audience. Some people may say, I don't get what you're saying here. And so you need to say, okay, how am I going to make that obvious to my audience? And the last one is who versus whom. This one is a little bit trickier to deal with. I'm not a Nazi about this, like a grammar Nazi. I know some people are. They're sticklers for it. I am not. If you want to try to figure out which word to use, who or whom, if you're talking about he, she, or they, it's who. If you're going to use the word him, her, or them, it's whom. So you just replace the word with who or whom, figure out what your pronouns are, and then you can reword it. If you just can't figure it out or you don't care, just stick with whom. And it's okay, guys, I promise. Now, what I want you to do from here is I want you to take your baseline essay and go through it and highlight. Doesn't matter what color, just highlight every instance where you find those issues in your writing. No writing, no comments, just highlight them. So you can start looking at and be aware of your own writing. You've already done a little bit of it before, but these are very specific issues, and I want you to look for those, especially the comma one. That comma handout is there for you. There are 11 comma rules. Look at those commas and see what you can find, okay? This will help you start looking at your own writing in the editing process a little bit more critically. Have a great time, guys, with this. I know you will enjoy it. Bye.